On this episode of Power People and Personal Things, we dive into an informative conversation with Lakisha N, Esquire, family law attorney. This episode is called Child Support in New Jersey: Facts, Myths, and Realities. Welcome to our podcast, Power People and Personal Things. We have with us today Lakisha N, Esquire, and we are so happy to have you here today, Miss Dean. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited about this topic. This is something I'm very passionate about. So thank you for joining us today. Before I get started, I just want to issue a really quick disclaimer to everybody. I just want to let everyone know that today's conversation is for informational purposes, information and educational purposes only. This is a podcast interview and not legal advice. Listening does not create an attorney-client relationship. And if you have any questions about your own situation, you should consult a licensed attorney. Mrs. Dean, thank you so much. Why don't we start off by letting you introduce yourself?
Sure. First of all, I want to thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I am really passionate about what I do. And I think one of the most important things that I do as an attorney is to educate people about the law. So I'm really glad to use this as an opportunity to help people understand what's going on in the law in New Jersey. I practice family law. My office is based out of Cherry Hill, but we cover almost every county in New Jersey. I'm in South Jersey, but we cover cases in Essex County, Bergen County, all over the place. We handle issues dealing with divorce, custody, child support, domestic violence, relocation. That happens a lot where people want to leave the state with their child or move out of the state with their child. So we do all things family law.
What drew you specifically to working on family cases here in New Jersey?
Yeah, I first started off in criminal law. I
Wow.
graduated from Temple University. I passed the bar in New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. I started off as an assistant prosecutor in Chester County, Pennsylvania, because I loved criminal law. It was glamorous. But once I had children, I realized it was a little dark. So maybe I should venture into something else. But really, what pulled me into family law was something that happened in my personal life. I had a nephew who was actually adopted without my brother's consent. And he was adopted by a family in Canada. So you can imagine it was I couldn't just call someone and say, bring him back. I couldn't just go to a court anywhere in the country, really. This family in Canada has to bring my nephew back. In my family, I was the first to graduate from college. My mom, my brothers, my other siblings looked at me and like, what are you going to do about it? Not only did I have a college degree, but I had a law degree and a little bit of experience in family law after going to a clinic in law school. So I actually started off in court in New York, but there was not much they could do. No one could tell Canada, bring this child back, not a court in New York. So then we jumped through a lot of hoops, a lot of case law, a lot of research. And within about 3 months, my brother and I were able to get on a plane to Canada and bring my nephew back.
Wow.
So I realized if I could have that impact on someone's life, my own family, then I felt like I could use my skills and what I was blessed with to be able to help other families. And that's how I started in family law.
Wow, that is a passionate story, and it's very touching. It's one of those stories where you have to do something about it. You can't just sit by. Something has to be done. Are there any misconceptions as to what family law attorneys actually do?
I think a lot of people come into this thinking they want to win, especially when you think about criminal cases. The outcome is so clear cut. Either you are going to jail or you're not, or you're convicted or you're not. Family is very different. I tell a lot of my clients, unfortunately, the fact that you're here to see me or that you have to go to court means you've lost. It means that there's a child that now has to experience some sort of dysfunction, most likely, and possibly a broken home. So that's not winning. And regardless of what happens going forward, it's not a situation where you feel like you're going to win. Oftentimes in family court cases, I feel like I have to take a shower afterwards. You're asking a court to step into a case and make a decision about people and things that are very important to you. And the judge doesn't know you, your co-parent, or your child from a can of paint. One of the misconceptions is that people can just go in, have a laundry list of things they want to get out of a case, and check off a box. It's really not like that. People need to be open-minded and willing to compromise when it comes to family court.
And that's very hard to do in family court, especially when it comes to the separation of a relationship. I mean, who wants to come together and give up something?
Absolutely. Especially when emotions are involved and people
Right.
pick up, and don't let a parent start seeing someone else. Oh, it's over.
Is it a bad idea when people have to go to court for them to bring their new partners if they are dating someone else?
Honestly, it really depends on the circumstance. If you know that your co-parent is volatile, if you know it's going to trigger them and push their buttons, I would say just let that person stay in the background. They certainly can't come up to the table with you when you're addressing the court. Courts don't want to see that. And if they see that you're the person contributing to the drama, especially if there's a lot going on behind us, people are rolling their eyes, and courts see that. And if they're aligned with you, then that's not a good thing. The court's going to think that when we step out of the courtroom, you're the one that's going to create the drama for the child. So I would say, if you can, just let that person stay back.
New Jersey, I always hear that New Jersey's child support system is very harsh or is very unique with comparison to other states. I've been through the family courts myself, so this is an issue that I've heard about time and time again. What makes New Jersey's child support system unique in comparison to any other states, if there is anything unique about New Jersey?
Well, I can say in comparison, at least to like New York and Pennsylvania, New Jersey is only different in the sense that we have two types of guidelines based on the amount of parenting time a parent has. So if you have more, like if we're at a point where it's 50-50, then the one parent or the other is going to pay a lot less child support, because the support is designed for the parent to have money to cover expenses for the child when the child is with them. Another distinguishing factor is that in New Jersey, child support ends at age 19, whereas other states it may be 18, and I believe New York it may even be 21. With New Jersey, once we talk about a child who's now in college at the age of 19 or 20, there may still be child support in place. You just have to prove that that child is actually in school. And then we get into something called college contribution, which is a little different than child support, which could actually be a lot more than child support. Because if you think about it, college tuition, college expenses may be a lot more than a person is paying that $250 a week. Those are the things that set New Jersey apart, at least from its neighboring states.
Now, does that college portion stop at a particular age, or is it just as long as they're in college? Because if they're pursuing a bachelor's, then a master's, and then a doctorate, they could, well be into,
Right. Their 30s,
20s.
40s.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yes. No, typically it goes through undergrad. Unless
Okay.
the parties have discussed and agreed that they're going to be responsible as parents to pay for more than that. I was successful in one case years ago where I was able to continue that college contribution for a child that was in a master's program. But typically it ends at undergraduate.
College is very, very expensive. Very,
Absolutely.
very expensive. Is child support ever really paid in full and on time?
Prior to this podcast, we did a little bit of research, and in 2023, it was paid in about 66% of cases. I think most people, mothers, fathers, understand that they are financially responsible for their child in most cases. But oftentimes, that other 40%, that's what takes up a lot of the air in the room, because when people don't want to pay, they really go through extremes to not pay. And a lot of people, obviously 40% is not a low percentage, are not paying or are not paying on time. So what I recommend is that if you are the person who's receiving child support, to really do so through the probation department so that it can be documented and there's less paperwork for you to bring to court in the event that you have to go back to enforce that. Because if it's paid through probation, the judge can track what's been paid, what the arrears are, if there have changes been made, instead of you having to bring your receipts. It's a
Right.
little bit easier.
So is that when they have, because I've heard of some people doing like a certified agreement where they put something in writing and then have someone notarize it, and this is their agreement as opposed to going to the courts. Is that something that's not tracked by the courts?
That would not be tracked by the court unless, as part of that agreement, there's a few things you'd have to do. You'd have to take that agreement, have a judge sign off on it so that it becomes an official order. Otherwise, it's just a contract between you and the other parent. To make it an order, you have to You have a judge sign it. Also, you have to say that the payment is going to go through the Department of Probation for whatever county the parent who's paying lives in, so that it can be tracked by the court. Otherwise, it will not be.
And in New Jersey, the Department of Probation, they're the ones that enforce the child support or the
Absolutely.
judge's order.
Yes.
So when there are some people like, when they just do not want to pay child support and, they take extreme measures such as they work off the books, they move out of state, and, they simply don't pay. Is there any way for parents to recoup the money that's owed to them?
Yeah, and this is a tough situation that happens way too often. If you are a parent who is not receiving support, sometimes probation will actually kick in for you. It's important to make sure your order says that it's going to go through probation. After a while, they will see that the payments are not coming in and they initiate some type of enforcement action. Otherwise, you can do that as a parent. And there are a couple of things you can do to make sure that you'll get your money, but nothing is a guarantee. So one of the things you can do is ask that if the other parent misses 2 or more payments, then a bench warrant will be issued for their arrest. And once that happens, you can ask for something that's called strict probation, which means that in order to be let out of jail, if they are eventually arrested, they will have to pay all of the arrears. Okay, so that's what it looks like on paper. But in reality, people have to think twice before they actually want someone to be arrested. Because if someone's sitting in jail, they're not working, they're not paying child support. Secondly, if they actually are arrested, then typically what the officer or probation officer will ask of the person to receive it is, look, this person owes you $50,000. Right now they can pay 4. Will you be willing to accept that so they can get back to work? And usually the answer has to be yes, because if they're not working, you're really not going to get anything.
Right.
So those are some of the things you can do. If a person is likely to come into some money and it's going through probation, and let's say they win the lottery or get a huge tax refund, that money will be offset to pay the child support that's in arrears. So that's why it's important to make sure you go to court and to make sure you're going through probation so all of these things can be tracked.
So if someone has a child support order, how does it get to the level that the federal government steps in or that they owe? I've heard of people having their tax returns garnished because of child support. There was a woman who did my taxes before, and she used to tell me that she had someone come to her every single year to see if he was getting a refund or if he owed the government. And if he was due a refund, he wouldn't file his taxes because he owed child support.
Yeah.
And it was several years, she said, he'd been doing this. I believe it was more than 10.
Wow.
Is there anything that says people actually have to file their taxes? I mean, or what gets it to the point where it does get garnished or the IRS knows that they owe it and then they just simply don't file their taxes?
Well, then it's a whole, people can really try to scheme in so many different ways. But that's why it's important to have a court order, first of all,
Right.
so that there is someone from the government, whether it's New Jersey or the federal government, tracking that. New Jersey will report, I believe they report their statistics to the federal government. So at some point, a person's passport can be suspended, and that's how their taxes can be offset, because all of that is in the system under a person's social security number. It really doesn't pay to try to run from this. As a person who owes child support, your best bet is, in most circumstances, would probably be to go to court and say, look, judge, I honestly cannot afford it. And at least give me some type of relief temporarily. But even that is not easy to do, because in order to modify child support, you have to show that you have a permanent change, not just that you're underemployed or out of a job right now. Because the way the court and the state sees it, your child is your primary financial responsibility.
Wow.
I just have a question. Listening to this, it almost seems like to me child support is the last resort, because it seems like, I know it's necessary for absentee parents that abandon their kids, but if there's people that are still connected and speak with one another, it almost seems like it drives a wedge. So say you have a parent that's seeking child support. Do you counsel them to say go to family court? Maybe you and the father, because I know people that have joint custody. The child will be in their home and they'll go to me, that seems like a better option. Do you recommend that they seek family counseling first or go to the family court to get parental rights?
Yeah, I think family court is always a last option, even though it keeps me in business. I would suggest mediation. I would suggest, it depends on the circumstances, counseling as a family, individual counseling, especially for some of my divorce cases. People really need that. Family counseling. And if not, just some, because not everyone's going to be together. Mediation may work because then you control the narrative. The judge doesn't know you. So they're going to order what the law tells them to do, regardless of your individual family, unique circumstances. But if you can go to mediation and sit across from someone and say, you know what, I'm not going to get everything I want, but here, we can work this out for the child's sake. To me, that's always better because you get to dictate what happens.
Right. I think that if people did more mediation and talking, it would do so much good. Sometimes there's heartbreak involved and a misconception that the other person just wants your money. Realistically, if you're taking care of the child, all that money is gone anyway. Lunch money, activities, if you are really in it for the benefit of the child, taking care of their needs and keeping them engaged, academically involved, that money is gone. It's gone.
That's why it's so important that people work together. But it's tough, especially a person's going to invest in me, then that means they're ready for the fight, usually. You know what I mean? Or if they're going to invest in me, they want to get the most that they can out of the system. I do think even in giving advice to people, I will tell them court sometimes is the last option. If we have to do it, we have to do it. But child support, what you're going to get, it's not going to be enough. So what I do is I try to incorporate, like we try to have, because child support itself will cover, it includes like if a parent is paying for medical insurance, and if another parent has another child they're paying for in New Jersey, that's considered. So they're not paying so much out of pocket, but it doesn't really cover for activities, for tuition, So when I see that, I try to get the parties to figure out, okay, are we going to pay for that 50-50 so that they don't have to go back to court after they've used me when the child wants to participate in most of these sports now are year round. All these sports now, the training, the level is just, when I was a kid, it wasn't this serious. Now it's like everybody's going to the NBA, everybody's going to the NFL, and they're starting at 4.
For soccer now, and it's like $3,400.
Gosh, it's so expensive. So child support, if you're getting $150 a week, that's doing nothing. That's not paying for cleats. No, not covering anything. So it's important to understand the reality now, like how expensive it is to live, how expensive it is to have a child, because we all want to expose our child to as much as we can. We have to consider that. And it's so important. I wish I could catch people before they choose a person that they have a child with. Can we have seminars on that?
Oh, yes. How is child support actually calculated in New Jersey? What goes into that calculation?
Yeah, so we have what we call the New Jersey Child Support Guidelines. It's a formula that we don't really control, but we use as family law attorneys, we have the same software that the courts have to calculate it. So what we start with is both parents' incomes. Most times people think it's just the person paying, but no, we consider both parents' incomes. We take that income, add it together, and we get 100%. One parent might be 70% responsible. The other parent may be 30% responsible based on their incomes. Then we consider how much parenting time the parties have. If it's more equal, less money exchanges hands. But if dad or mom is only exercising parenting time every other weekend, then they are going to be paying a little bit more to the other parent because they have that child more. We also consider which parent is taking money from their income to pay for health insurance because we know those premiums are high. So we want to make sure that they get some type of credit for that. That's really what it's based on. One of the things that I think is really important to understand too, is that a lot of people, especially in this economy, are underemployed or unemployed. And then they think that because of that, they don't have to pay child support, but that's not true. What happens is income can be imputed to the parent that is underemployed. So let's say mom is working only 20 hours a week, but she makes $40 an hour. She's going to be imputed income at 40 hours a week, making $40 an hour. So dad will pay a little bit less because mom's percentage for that 100% whole is going to go up. So people don't understand that. And that's even for people who think they can scam the system and not work as much as they can.
Right.
You can't get away with that.
So if someone's parenting percentage is 0 and the other person is 100, what's the maximum amount of child support that they have to pay?
That's a good question. So it's not, I can't tell you what that maximum number would be.
Mhm.
All the numbers are plugged into that algorithm.
Got it.
What it does is it takes the, because every case is going to be different because all of those numbers are going to be different.
Right.
So once we plug all the numbers in, it spits out a final number, which reflects the weekly amount that the payor has to pay.
But with zero parenting time, that sounds like it would be much higher than 50% or
Absolutely.
30%.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Wow.
But what if the parent, the other parent that is, I'm going for child support, and
Mhm.
the child's father lives with someone? Is that income included? In the
No, that
percentage
is,
of
no,
child
it's
support?
not. They're not responsible for the child. So their income
Okay.
is not included. What matters is his income. The only time another parent's income is taken into consideration is when, and I'm just using the father for purposes of this example. Let's say you have a dad who has another child with another woman he's married to. Typically, his wife's income is not considered for his child that's with another woman's income or child support. His wife's income is not considered for child that he had with his old ex-wife. That makes sense? It's
Makes
not.
sense.
But it needs to be included if it needs to be considered if dad with his new wife has another child. In order for the courts to give him credit for what he would have to pay for his new child, we would have to run the guidelines for dad and his new wife. So we need to know in order to determine what dad's percentage of child support would be for the baby with his new wife. He's going to get credit for that. If dad is responsible for, let's say, $400 a month for his new baby, then he's going to get some type of credit for having to pay child support for that second child on the child support guidelines for the first child.
Got it.
It's not a dollar for dollar amount, but the court wants to give people credit if they already have money coming out of their paychecks and they're actually supporting a second child. And that's called an ODD or other dependent deduction. They get a deduction for that.
Wow.
That makes sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that. Everyone always talks about this subject, and it's like their income should be considered too, but
Yeah,
wow.
in New Jersey. But another important point I want to make about that is that only a person will get that deduction under
Mhm.
two circumstances. One is if they actually live with that child and they're taking care of that child. And the second circumstance is if they have a court order for child support for that child. Otherwise, dad could say, oh yeah, I'm paying child support to my girlfriend over there, but she lives somewhere else and the child doesn't live with him and there's no court order. Then the court can't verify exactly how much support he's paying.
Some people think that child support is only for mothers.
Oh, I know.
This sounds like it's such a myth. Is that true that it's only for mothers?
Not the way, well, honestly, it can be. If the mom wanted to use, in the state of New Jersey, that is, if mom wanted to use it to get her nails done every week, she absolutely can. But it's not the way New Jersey looks at it, it is for the child. So that really means that mom can't even waive it if she wants to. There are times when we agree that they may not pay a certain amount or they'll agree that we have to account for it though. Even in divorces, we can't just say, oh, judge, I don't want support. No, because it's not for you, mom. It's not for you, dad. It's for the child. But if mom wants to use that for whatever she wants to use it, that's on her. Because ultimately, mom is paying the rent or the mortgage and living with the child. She has to pay for his or her food, clothing, shelter, light bill, all that stuff.
But fathers, some people think that fathers are never the recipients of child support payments.
Right, right. And that's not true. If the child is with them, if the script can be flipped at any time. You know, and it
Right.
often is. Often moms do have to pay support to dad if they're not living with that child full time, or even if it's a situation where they're sharing custody, but moms happens to make more money than dad.
Now, is there ever an opportunity where if there's like a 50-50, or if the mom has the children majority of the time, if the court order says the dad has visitation on the weekends, but he's actually spending 90% of the time with the kids and is actually paying double of what the courts say he should because the kids are with him, so he's doing more food, more clothes, trips, like he's paying double of what the court said he's supposed to, because outside of the courts, either the mom is not available, she's just, hey, can you take the kids? He's just picking up more responsibility. Is that a situation where it's possible for that father to get his child support reduced or even eliminated completely.
Absolutely. In order to change an existing court order, you have to show a significant change in circumstances. And for child support, that needs to be a permanent change. So if that dad happens to go to court and say, Judge, this is what was ordered in 2023, but 2 weeks after the order, the kids came to live with me and I take care of them. And that's been the status quo. The judge is going to see that. Ultimately, family courts are courts of equity. They want to do what's fair and what's in the best interest of the child. So it would not be fair or in the child's best interest if dad continued to pay an exorbitant amount when the children are really living with him. So he's paying for them and he's providing for them outside of that order. So I would suggest in that scenario, they just need to go back to court. And I think the judge would agree with them.
Now, if the custodial parent, the one that has the child, now if they are not letting the non-custodial parent see the child, can that stop their child support payments?
The court sees child support and parenting time as separate. Children are entitled to support regardless. There are parents who owe $90,000 in child support, but a judge is not going to prevent those children from seeing that parent because they feel a child should have equal access to both parents.
Right.
You know, and we don't have to be perfect parents, but the court will slam that parent on the child support for the child's sake. It wants that child to have access to that parent.
So what do they do in a case where they go to pick up their children on a weekend or a weekday and the other parent is like, no, I'm not going to let you see your child today?
Yeah, they have to go to court. They must get a court to intervene. And if it's really emergent, they can file an emergent motion. In order to be granted that successfully, you have to show that the child is at risk of irreparable harm. And that's a high standard. It has to be a pretty serious situation in order to get that. But absolutely go back to court. Judges are human beings too. If they see that you haven't had access to your child for 4 years, and then you come back and say, but Judge, I haven't seen him in 4 years. I need to do X, Y, and Z. A judge is going to be like, why'd you wait so long?
Right.
But how easy is that to document? Like you said, you're paying child support and the woman say she's being vindictive and dad's paying. How would they go about documenting that, hey, I'm making the effort and she's not?
Yeah. So what you can do is have parents meet at a police station or a designated place with a camera. You can file a police report to say, I showed up, mom was not here, just to show that you did it. But even simpler than that, keep a journal. I have journals in my office. I just gave one to a client yesterday to keep things contemporaneously as they're happening, document them. Because when you draft your motion, you can attach copies and a court is likely to believe it because you documented it the same time it was happening. So that's what I would suggest. Just continue to document, but don't wait forever to go back to court. That will hurt you instead of helping you.
Waiting.
If your child hasn't seen you in 4 years, is it really in the child's best interest to just, okay, dad, you have overnights now every other weekend? That child doesn't really know you. And you may need some sort of like reunification therapy, which means then you're going to have to see your child in a foreign setting with someone else sitting in the room. That's going to inhibit you from naturally bonding with your child. It's just going to be awkward. So when things happen, I would suggest within the 6 months of that happening, you go back to court.
Is there ever a situation where parents or non-custodial parents, they just choose to pay the support and ghost the family, the child, everybody, and there's no more communication after that judge's order?
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens, and it's really sad. What I see more often is when a parent is not happy with the amount of support they have to pay, and they have to pay anyway because it's coming out through wage garnishment. Then they may retaliate and say, well, yeah, I'm going for 50-50 custody. And they don't want it. They don't want it, And if they get what they want, then they just don't show up. And that's so bad for the child. Like, that's horrible for a child. That's so traumatic, all for money.
Are there any resources that would support a situation like that? For the parent that has the child, oftentimes when you get into these situations, you don't really think about, you hear about these stories, even celebrities that don't know their parents growing up and they grow up to be so successful. But when they're young, I don't know if there are any resources that a custodial parent can turn to in a situation like this that would support her along the way or support their child along the way.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know of any outright resources that support parents who aren't getting enough child support. Just maybe in terms of the government benefits, SNAP benefits, just to supplement the income they get. Uh,
Yeah,
and sometimes it's like it may even hurt you. I know this was the case years ago if you do get child support, because that's just seen as another source of income. So it's like
right.
damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. And it's really unfortunate because as single parents, that child support already is not enough, as we discussed before. I can't think of any resources off the top of my head that help those particular individuals directly, except for maybe just different local organizations or government benefits.
Yeah, it's very challenging, especially for single parents. I'm a single parent, so I see this a lot. I think of support groups that are good for youngsters, community engagement opportunities, young men groups, groups that support with community leaders, things like that, because it's very challenging in the conversations that I have, seeing so many people going through the same thing. I think that a
Mhm.
conversation can sometimes cure a lot because I feel like custodial and non-custodial parents, they may have a different perception of the situation because they haven't had a conversation.
The one thing I stress always is communication. People have so many emotions they're dealing with. People are in their feelings and they don't want to communicate or they can't communicate effectively,
Yeah.
And now we have a baby or two. And you guys have to figure out how to co parent. And that means you have to talk to each other about this child. And when they can't do that, that's why family courts pretty much exist. Most of the situations go right back to communication.
Now, after a child support order is issued, let's say 5 years down the line, the custodial parent moves and they're in a more expensive school environment or a more expensive community. Can they go back to court and say, hey, I need more money based on XYZ?
Yeah, you can, especially when it comes to school, if it comes to daycare, because
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of considered outside of the guidelines. So if something changes where it's a permanent situation and you need more support, then absolutely go back to court. But you actually made me think of something else that I think is important for people to understand about child support in New Jersey. That is, it is income based only. And I say that because so many people think that, oh, because I got to pay a car note, I got to pay rent. Do they take that into consideration and see what I have left over at the end of the month? The answer is no. No. Child support is only based on your income. It's not based on all the expenses you have. The court considers your child your primary financial responsibility above your rent, above your car, above your insurance. There is an adjustment made for the cost of living, and that's usually done automatically by probation. And people will notice an increase every 2 or 3 years in their child support payments because they're adjusting for the cost of living.
Yeah, I've seen. I've
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
actually makes sense, the adjustment, but also that they're only considering income because then it
Right.
could be a lot. Oh, I got this a big Lexus now. My car note
Exactly.
increased. Need more money. People say don't even try to milk it. So I'm
Right.
happy
Right.
that's in place.
Yeah. People would gain
Right.
more, especially people who are trying to beat the system. They'd buy more things so that they wouldn't have to pay. You know how it is when you get married, right? People come all dressed up and got expensive clothes on, but don't give a gift. It's like that.
When you go into court, is there anything that you wish that people understood before they chose to go the child support route? Like, do people really understand what they're getting into?
Yeah, I think for me, so many times child support is mixed in with custody issues and parenting time because child support is really pretty cut and dry. It's as
Mhm.
cut and dry as any other, more than any other issue in family law because of the formula. So all the judge needs is your pay stubs. That's it. And then they can calculate it. A lot of people don't understand that. They don't understand that they take the income of both parents. They don't understand that it's income based, not expense based. A lot of people, when they have to pay, are so frustrated about that. But I think where it gets a little tricky is when it comes to parenting time and it comes to the
Okay.
emotions. That's where things get a little messy. And I wish people understood that child support is really separate from whether or not a parent is entitled to spend time. Parents have a constitutional right to the company of their children.
Mm.
Courts do not impede on that right. That's why a person can owe a ton of money in child support, but will still be allowed to see their children as often as the court can allow them to.
And I would hope that they take advantage of that. We always hope that they take advantage because time waits for no one and you don't
Right.
get that time back. So when you lose that relationship with your child, you lose that time with your child. We don't really think about 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. People don't think about that when they're being that young, bitter self. They don't think about
Yeah.
what it's going to be like for them. You
Right,
know,
for the
it's
child. Yeah, and I see that on both sides. I see a lot of parents, moms or dads, who think that they are doing their child a favor by not letting them see the other parent, because while they may be toxic to them, that's still the parent of the child. And I feel like to some extent, that child needs to understand who that parent is and have some degree of exposure to the parent, unless they're really toxic, of course. And if they're neglectful, that's another thing altogether. But I don't think parents are necessarily doing a child a service if they just feel like, you know what, he hasn't grown up, he hasn't matured, I'm going to keep him out of your life until whenever. I don't
Yeah.
think that's cool.
Now, is it, people can always file for child support and custody themselves. Are those two separate issues? Like when you go to court and you're like, I'm going to file for child support, is it like a box you check for child support and the box you check for custody? Or can you go to court for custody and not child support?
Yes, absolutely. They are really two different things. If you need both, you need to ask for both, because the court, first of all, you have to give notice to the other side of what you're asking for so they can be prepared to respond. So if you really are just seeking child support, but you only ask for parenting time, the court's only going to address parenting time and then tell you to file a motion for support, because you need to submit certain evidence with that, at least your last 3 pay stubs, possibly tax returns, so the court can document your income. And you put the other side on notice that they need to bring that to court as well. Because oftentimes, so many cases are adjourned that first time they go to court because the other side, no one really brings the evidence they need for the court to make a decision. But they are separate, so you do have to ask for both of them if you want.
I want to pivot back to a question I forgot to ask earlier when we were discussing federal garnishments. When people get to the level when they owe that much money, because when I think about people who don't pay their child support, sometimes people may need to apply for public assistance because they're not getting the money ordered by the judge. The person may be working off the books and they're simply not paying. And then if that money is considered a debt to the federal government and the person doesn't pay their taxes, is there any way for a CPA or the state to file on behalf of the custodial parent to obtain that money? Because that would decrease the amount of public assistance that was needed by some individuals. Because if there's thousands or even millions of dollars just sitting out there because people won't file, either because they're mad or whatever the case may be, how much money are we wasting as a state to provide for families that otherwise have tax refunds just sitting on the books?
I don't know what it looks like on the back end, which is kind of what you're asking, if the government can force people to file. So
Yeah.
there's the whole rules with respect to the IRS in terms of how often people have to file, when they have to file. So the IRS will go after them anyway, separately, whether they owe child support or not. In dealing with child support, if the mom is on public assistance, one of the first things they will do is ask about that child's other parent. And then they will go after them for child support. The state will do that. There are attorneys, that's all they do. They represent the county or the state in going after the other parent for child support. Because what that looks like then is that the state is covering and being financially responsible for your child when you're supposed to be. So they're going to make sure they get money from that other parent to then give to the custodial parent. So it really starts up front. As soon as that mom or dad gets on public assistance, they're going to go after the other parent.
And let's say this goes on for years, well into this man's man or woman social security years. Can they garnish a social security check for child support?
You know, I think there's some things that can be used. I'd have to do a little bit more research if Social Security can be used. I think it can be used to pay for child support. Yeah.
I would hate to see somebody go into those golden wonder years still owing
Yeah. It
those
just
young
depends if they
years.
have a child that they're still, because, you know, when people get to that age, it's not typical for them to have a child that they're still financially responsible for. If it's income that can be considered under the guidelines, the government can go after that. The courts can go after that.
I know you mentioned communication earlier, and that's a big part of it. How do children usually get affected the most when child support becomes a very intense battle?
Yeah.
And
That child is not It just depends on their family circumstances, but that may mean that child is not getting the financial benefits they deserve. So it can increase the amount of money coming into that household, which translates into more food, better shelter, bills are paid on time, the child can participate in more activities. It depends. Some parents are just holding it down. They will get a second or third job to give their children.
What
But
they
when the other
need.
parent doesn't contribute, you can imagine in any way, it can affect so many ways. It can affect that child.
In your history, as long as you've been in this field, do you think that New Jersey's child support system needs any kind of reform?
I do feel like and because in my research over the years, there's so much that's gone into the guidelines themselves. I think we just have to always be aware of what's happening with the economy, because otherwise we can really fall short in providing families what they need. Across the board, people are losing jobs. It's really hard when families have mom and dad who are underemployed and just can't find work. I think what I'm thinking of now is that oftentimes, even the amount of child support that is required is just not enough.
Yeah.
I don't know how we close that gap, but I think it's important to stay aware of what's happening in the economy over a period, even of 5 to 10 years. We can't make changes just on what's happening today, but maybe following trends and really trying to make sure that the support is realistic and provides for children and their needs.
Right.
So you mentioned time. I know we were talking about the time. You mentioned when you get the child support, the money's pretty much already spent. It's never enough financially. And then there's a time with the parent, which benefits the child. What would you recommend for a single parent in general and the other parent, even though they may be contributing, but they're not putting in time? Is there a way to like something in place? I know you can't make someone put time in, but how does the court help in that way?
And the court really can't, especially if that parent doesn't want to spend time with the child, because the court's primary concern is the child's best interest. So it's not going to make that child spend time with a parent who doesn't want to spend time with them. That wouldn't help the child. And I know that frustrates the other parent. I get a lot of mothers who say, I need a break. Take the child, take them, please understand what their needs are. Do their homework with them, feed them snack, take them to school, because the burden is all on me. All you're doing is writing a check every other week, but the courts can't force that. They can't.
I've always found it's heartbreaking and disappointing that someone is okay knowing that they've made a child, created this life, and if the relationship didn't work out, the marriage didn't work out, or whatever the situation was, you put yourself in a position that to know that a child was possible. And then, when the child gets here, you completely remove yourself from the situation and leave the other person 100% responsible. I don't think I will ever understand how someone wakes up every single day, understands that they have a life out there that they created, that they just
Walk away from.
I don't think I will ever understand that. It's so hurtful. And maybe that's a psychological thing, a personal issue that people have. But it's very, very sad because
Yeah.
children don't ask to be here.
I know. I can't agree with you more. That's why I wish if I could wave a magic wand, it would require, because I've done this for over 20 years now. I try to serve people holistically. So I look a little bit deeper than what's just in front of me. One of the things I see is that people need to be more introspective, because this is my personal beliefs. I'm taking off my attorney hat for a minute. I find that the people that we invite into our lives are oftentimes a mirror of us. And not that we're exactly the same or the same image, but there are things about that person that I think if we learn to really check in ourselves and address within ourselves, then it may not be issues that are going to be a problem in other people that are in our lives. So I feel like if we were more careful in terms of getting to know ourselves better, getting to know the people we choose, especially that we choose to have children with, because the way that person shows up for themselves is going to be indicative of how they show up, if they show up at all, for a child. And I know I can't, it's hard to tell people that, but I see it all the time. And it's too late. By the time you come to me, it's way too late. And I'm not a therapist, so it's probably not even appropriate for me to say that. But I just feel like I need to say that. If that's one person and they just sit and think before, relationships teach us so much.
Yeah.
But before you have a child, it's like, just check in with yourself and take some kind of inventory with this person. And I know that's not easy to do. I know things happen, but like I said, that's only if I had that
Yeah.
magic wand.
Absolutely.
Mm.
In a perfect world, you want everything to be peaceful. You want everybody to support that child. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. As much as I see it within my own community, I've had my challenges throughout my life. It leaves a hole for the child. Sometimes that bucket gets filled, sometimes it does not. But I think it's up to us as parents to do as much as we can to support that, to fill that with love and with community for that child, because we can't make people take care of their responsibilities. They know the responsibilities are there.
Yeah.
I've talked to people who've worked for huge payroll companies, and the stories they tell me of what they garnish. It's, if you're paying that much money, at the very least, call your child. Some of them are even of age where, if you don't want to talk to the mom, there's a video call, there's a phone. There's so many options these days that I see. There's
Yeah.
no excuse.
People are broken. People are really
Yeah,
broken.
yeah.
And then they become parents, and that doesn't make them whole,
Right, right.
So it's really, really tough. That's why I don't judge people. A lot of the things my clients have been through, I've been there, done that. I can relate and understand. At least I can share that perspective. But it is tough on the kids. It didn't ask to be here.
One of the saddest things I think I've ever heard was someone had said to me years ago, if my mom wouldn't give me a family, I'll go out and make my own. I remember at the time I laughed because I was young. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought it was a joke. But it always stuck with me when they said that, But then when I became a mom and I thought about that, I realized how sad it was.
Yeah.
I realized how sad it was. And that's brokenness. You can't fill that hole that you had with your parent by going out and creating more life, because you're not going to know what to do with that life. You're not going to know how to take care of that life. That has always stuck with me just as a parent. It just says how sad some people really are on the inside. And if they did check in with themselves, things might be different for them on the outside.
Yeah. And we just have to be, I think, as a society, we have to be more proactive in giving people the tools to check in with themselves. And now, in this day and age of social media, it's not about checking in at all. It's about comparison. It's about,
Yeah.
what do I see based on whatever life people present on this screen in this 1 minute video. People feel like they're missing that, or they want to live up to that. And that's just taking people even more outside of themselves.
If you could change one thing about the family court system tomorrow, what would it be?
I think we really need more diversity of thought on the court. I think we have judges who do their best, but I often find that some judges cannot, it's like the litigants, the parents, and the judges are speaking two different languages, and they're speaking past each other.
Mm,
That's as sad as it is that these parents have to be there in the first place. They've already lost if they're there. It's so much more impactful and sad if judges just don't understand what circumstances lead people to be there. And I think that understanding is important. It will inform their decisions and how judges come across on the bench. I don't want their job. I really don't. I don't want to be a judge because I've realized how difficult it is. But if I could change anything tomorrow, I think that's what it would be, because I think people need to have confidence in the courts
yeah.
and be able to trust it. The courts need to be a vehicle for people to really work through some of these problems. Sometimes that's the only way people can get food on their kids' table, is going to court and getting child support.
Mm,
So if I could change one thing tomorrow, that's what it would be. There's not enough people who understand real life circumstances that inform the reasons they show up in court. I think that's important.
yeah. It's so heartfelt, but it's very true. Before we wrap up, can you please let our listeners know the best way to reach you if they're interested in learning more or need your services? Because you are amazing. I mean, you have amazing insight, you have amazing education, you have amazing background. Just, your experience is top tier. So I definitely want to give the opportunity for people to reach out to you and connect with you, whether it's your website, your social media. We'd love to share your information. I saw that you have a custody success toolkit on your website, which
Mhm.
is amazing. How can people get in touch with you and connect with you?
Sure. I think the easiest way is my website, which is www.lakishadeanlaw.com. And my name is not spelled with an E. I know we spell Keisha so many different ways. So it's LAKISHADEAN law.com. And there you'll find all of my information. I'm on TikTok. I know not everyone can invest in an attorney. So my way of paying it forward is educating people as much as I can. I have a YouTube channel where I have a video on almost everything. You can find me on TikTok, on Instagram, Lakisha.Dean, on Facebook, the Law Office of Lakisha Dean. I'm really everywhere except Twitter. So yeah, just punch in my name and you'll find me.
Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure connecting with you. I am grateful for your presence, information, and insight. Knowing that there are people like you that care, that really take that time, that thought, that effort to really put into the system. Like, this is what's needed. Sometimes when we go to attorneys, we want somebody that's going to be passionate about what they do, that's going to understand our circumstances and really just look at us and really understand what it is that we're going through.
People need to be seen. People need to be.
Yes, it
That's
is
the most
so
important.
important. It's so
And
important to be seen.
I've been through, there's probably not much my clients have been through that I haven't been through growing up. I didn't grow up with money, single parent home. I've seen a lot. And I think that one of the things that has made me so successful is being able to connect with people. And I don't take that lightly. I'm able to see people and I understand the need to be seen. So I just leave it there.
Thank
But
you
I
so
thank you
much.
for inviting me here. And I so appreciate the platform that you
Oh,
provide. Thank you.
you.
You learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. We'll be in
You
touch.
Take
Okay.
care.